Ma'am, what does the UPSC panel expect from a student who is coming for an interview?
See, normally students or a candidate's knowledge is already tested in the written examination. So when he comes for the interview, it's called basically a personality test. So they want to judge the overall personality of the candidate. How a person or a girl or a boy who comes for the interview would be able to handle situations, tackle problems as an officer when they face it, and how stable they are and how confident they are and what kind of decisions they would be able to take. Generally, it is an assessment, overall assessment of the personality of the candidate.
Okay. So there is this thing called we have to give a balanced answer or we have to give a decisive answer. Many students are confused. Okay, should we take a stand on this topic or should we give a balanced answer?
Yeah, you have to do both. A balanced answer will show how you are able to, gauge a situation, the pros and cons of a situation, because every situation has its plus and minus points.
Correct.
So whether the candidate is able to analyze that and how he or she is able to give a decisive answer of her or his stand. So generally, if the board asks them to take a stand, they have to take a stand. But if the board asks them to explain about a particular issue or an incident, then they have to explain both the pros and the cons. So it depends on what kind of question is put towards for the candidate, and the candidate has also to see. I generally tell everyone that it's a 30 to 45 minutes personality test, and within that time they have to gauge how good the candidate is in tackling or answering a question. So one needs to immediately come to the point.
Okay.
And handle the question. So it depends on what kind of question is put forth. Basically, balanced answers are good. But if there is a question where they ask you to give his or her decision, then the answer has to be decisive.
Okay, ma'am. So we need, if there is a situation, we can give both the pros and cons, and then come to a conclusion saying, yes, from my perspective, I would be doing
like this.
So
then that will, and we should always remember that the kind of answer we give will lead to the next question. So your answer will lead to the next question. So you should be very clear and sure what you are saying, and you should also be prepared to give the answer for the next question. So the interview will be led by you generally. Whatever answer you give, that will lead to the next question, and when you give an answer to that, then the next question would be asked. So one should be very careful in what kind of words you use, what sentences you put forward, because a particular word will definitely lead you to the next question. If somebody says, I am very passionate about serving the society, why did you write the exam? I am very passionate in serving the society. Then the next question will be, why are you passionate? How did you get passionate? So, the answer which you give will take you to the next question.
Yeah. Ma'am, what is it that the students, the panel gauges from your hobbies and how we answer based on the hobbies?
Yeah, generally, in any interview, especially in the UPSC personality test, your application form is before the panel. So they would look at every part of it. And if the hobbies are interesting, and definitely there would be a question on the hobbies, like if somebody has written that, if a male has written that I am interested in cooking, so definitely that will be a little different. So they will ask that kind of a question. Or if somebody talks about, I remember saying that I am interested in collecting gramophone records. In old those days we had those gramophone records. So that is something different. So that kind of questions would be asked. So hobbies definitely would form some part of the questions which would be asked.
Ma'am, what is it that they analyze based on our answers?
So as I told you, they would basically like to analyze your personality, how confident you are, and how you would face tough situations. Sometimes they may ask provocative questions just to see how you would handle it, whether you will get nervous or whether it disturbs you, or you are answering the questions very coolly,
Okay.
handling it in a very professional or balanced way, because that will also impact what kind of an officer you are going to be in future. When there is a crisis, are you going to panic or are you going to handle it in a balanced way? So that is what they assess, how pleasant the person is. So it's a overall gauging of your personality.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, what is a key element to a success in an interview?
Key element. See, basically you have to be confident. That is very important. You have to be pleasant, and you should be able to, handle a tough question in the right way. And if you are unable to answer it, you can always tell the board that you are not very sure about the answer. And if the board asks you to guess it, you can guess, otherwise you can say no. And then the board will generally give you the answer, then you can thank them for the answer.
Okay.
So the key is your overall personality, You should be pleasant, smiling, and should not appear too tensed. And even if you're tense, they know that you're tense because it means a lot to you. It's
Yes.
your life is going to be made. But if the answers are genuinely very well rooted, grounded, and properly presented, I think it impresses the board.
Ma'am, now we see variety of candidates. It's not, and some are from IITs, IIMs, and some would be from a small college, small town college, or some would have participated in NCC and sports and things like that. Some would not have done any of that. So how is it that candidates are based on, are they based on equal terms, or will the DAF matter a little?
No, basically each candidate is judged by his or her, background. It's not that, somebody is an IIT or IIM gets more and somebody comes from rural background gets less. It's not like that. Everybody is treated equally, and it all depends on how the candidate answers and faces the board
At that
point of time. That is important. And of course, based on your background, different questions will crop up. Of course, that will happen. But overall, gauging of the personality happens only on how the candidate answers.
Okay. Now, many students are insecure about gaps. For example, after college or after work, after they quit work, they would have studied for 2-3 years or 4-5 years even. So now all of us will be insecure at that point of time. What if they ask questions on our academic background? What if they ask us about the gap? What have you been doing in this gap? How is it that interview panel looks at it?
No, the panel will be, they'll be very professional about the gaps. They would just ask somebody why this gap has happened, and one has to be honest and frank about the gap. Because there would be some people who would have worked in a private sector for some time and then resigned from the job and then studied for 2 years or 3 years and again, appeared for the examination. And there would be several, sometimes there will be a gap of 6 to 7 years also. So one has to be very frank and tell the board why they are there. So all that is not going to impact them. What is going to impact them is how you are answering in the personality.
So they should not be tense or worried about the gap.
There's nothing like that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, how do we go about answering controversial questions?
Controversial questions, generally they don't ask controversial questions. But as I told you, it depends on how you answer.
Correct.
Sometimes the candidate himself or herself draws himself or herself into a controversial question by speaking certain things which ought not to have said, or which could have been worded in a different way. So naturally the board will cross question based on what you are saying, and that will ultimately, unfortunately, lead to a controversial question or an answer. So try to avoid using words or sentences which you are not very sure about.
Okay.
Use simple words, simple sentences, and once it's you have unfortunately or unknowingly got dragged into a controversial question, then you have to answer it in a own way. You have to use your common sense and your tact at that point and try to give it a proper heading.
Okay.
And not get too worried or too, people start sweating sometimes and they realize that they have made a mistake and they don't know what to do. So coolly try to handle it and bring it to a logical end.
Yeah.
What matters is presence of mind and being cool. Presence of mind is very, very important. How you, instantly give a right answer at the right time.
Right.
That's very important. Because there's no time to think and, brood over things there. They keep asking you, you have to keep answering. So your presence of mind should be the most important thing when you're facing a personality test.
Ma'am, normally it happens that once we ask the question, students, can they take some time to answer it, or should they be answering it immediately? Or?
No, if they know the answer, it's always better to answer immediately. But if they really want to take a time, if they feel the question is so tough and they want to take a time, they can just say, sir, can I take a minute?
Okay.
And then answer.
Okay. Ma'am, what are the do's and don'ts somebody should do during the interview preparation?
See, it is like as I mentioned earlier that your knowledge is already tested in the written examination, and you are one of the selected few who has reached to the level of facing the interview board. And of course, all are very excited about going for the interview, and everybody hopes that they get selected and things like that. So what does one do? First, as I always tell everybody, they should go through their biodata, whatever they have filled up, everything word to word, they should prepare on that. Even your name, if somebody has a very unique name or a unique family name, it might lead to a question on that. So you have to sometimes people don't know what their name means sometimes, or sometimes they don't know the family name. And in South India, the family name is there, and then the name of the candidate is there. So you need to prepare from there, the name of your village, the name of your district, then your school. Suppose your school has a unique name, then the subjects you have taken, and then your hobbies, everything, entire biodata, as you go through the application form. And also sometimes you would have changed subjects, you would have probably been in a science faculty and then you would have moved to arts or something like that. So why you have moved out? You have to be very frank. So the entire biodata, if you prepare very well, starting from ending with your extracurricular activities and your hobbies, anything could be asked, if anything is unique. So the most important thing which I want to guide the aspirants is that when you fill your biodata, should be very careful, because sometimes what I have seen is that they write reading books. So when you ask them what books have you read, they are not able to go beyond 1 or 2 books.
Okay.
So if you have read 1 or 2 books, it can't be your hobby. Hobby has to be really, you are very passionate about reading books. Sometimes they say reading classical novels.
Okay.
What do you mean by that? Then what are the classical novels you read? What is that you like? That is some question which a member would ask, and then they are unable to answer that. Or they may write badminton or cricket. Many people write badminton and cricket, and probably they would have played badminton somewhere in school or college for a year as a pastime, and they would write as a hobby. Then there is some question on the badminton or cricket, they would be unable to answer. So you should be very clear when you fill the application form on issues where you are able to answer with total confidence.
Depth and confidence.
Otherwise, there's no point in filling.
Ma'am, now most of them would have just played or something.
Yeah.
Cricket, they would be playing cricket or badminton or anything, but they might not follow it.
Yeah, then they should not write it if they're not able to.
Okay.
If they are not able to, because sometimes people feel if they don't write anything,
It will be taken
it
negatively.
is that they don't have it. So let them write at least some hobby or extracurricular activity where they are little knowledgeable about it. Okay, they have some awareness about it, or which they are continuing to do it. That is one important thing. I think many of them. Then while giving options, also the people are not very sure. I mean, the standard is IAS, IPS, IFS, or something like that. You know, then Central Income Tax and Customs. And then when questions are asked, sometimes people give foreign service as the first preference, or the police service as the first preference. So definitely that question would be asked. Why have you opted for police above the IAS, or why have you opted for the foreign service? So you should be very clear why you are opting for these kind of things. So a candidate probably, you know, they consult some friend or somebody in the study center. So one is not very sure. We can't blame them because they don't have the exposure to government service. So they would write. But little bit of personal interest also has to be there when you opt for something. And when you fill the biodata also, you need to be very, very sure what you are writing will be later on become part of the question paper for you when you go for the personality test. So that's important.
Ma'am, you just mentioned case studies. They would not have exposure to the services and all that. So when we have such case studies coming in, you are not a officer who is in that situation, but you still have to answer a question based on that.
Yeah.
So how should a student approach it without getting tensed at that point of time?
Yeah.
So, and definitely they will be judged based on their decision, how they will go.
See, that is very important. That is where you get your marks, you know, you more marks than the others. Now, generally, when you go for a personality test, and the question, when, you know, sometimes most of them say that I have a passion to work for the society, I want to serve the nation, I want to serve the poor, that is why I have opted for the IAS. So, naturally, the next question which would be asked is throwing up a case study. Suppose you are a collector in a particular district, there has been a cyclone, or there's been a scarcity situation, or there is illiteracy there, or there are a lot of social problems. How would you tackle it? See, because that will be the next question, because you said that you are passionate to work for the people. So the answer which you are going to give for that question cannot be prepared as such, because little bit preparation can be done, but then you should have a genuine concern to
people,
to work for the people. When you have the general concern, then your answers will automatically come out. So that is, but if you are not at all having the concern, and you're just, you know, writing that for the sake, or speaking for the sake of speaking, then there'll be a problem. But definitely I can tell you that giving an answer at the interview and then going to the field, definitely you learn a lot of things on the field.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
And the board also knows that the person has no field experience, but the board would like to know what kind of concern you have for the people, and your answer will tell you what kind of concern you have. If you are really concerned, then you will be able to give the proper answers.
So it's not something one has to be very innovative in giving the answer or anything.
Yeah, if they have some innovative ideas, they can. But I'm not able to actually tell how it is. So, for example, if they say that, suppose there is a crisis, and then there are some people, boys and girls, who have little, you know, more concern. They will say immediately, I'll call for a meeting of all the officers, and I will ensure that responsibilities are given, and I'll send them to the respective areas to
and I'll coordinate.
And I'll coordinate and I'll try to solve the problem. Maybe a person who doesn't have that kind of experience will say, I will use technology and I will do this. Yes, technology can be used, but technology is, it's not the immediate answer. Technology can be one of the tools. So it depends on what kind of concern you have and how you perceive a situation which needs to be handled.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, now there are certain people who would have come from rural background and things like that. So does language and communication skill have an impact on your interview?
Yeah, language and communication, I think communication is the key. Even if your language is not that good, you can communicate in the right way. People in the board, you're not looking at the grammar, the correct preposition or adverb and adjective to be at the right places, but how you would like to, how you give a solution or how you answer. So definitely the board will be not impressed on the grammar part, but the communication on the issue, how they talk about it. And sometimes people who come from rural areas do speak very sweetly, though their grammar may not be very good, but the kind of commitment they have and the control they have over the subject makes a lot of difference. And you see that I think UPSC is the only examination where people from rural backgrounds, extreme poverty, backwardness, do make it into the civil services. And I think this is one of the best services which attracts the talent across the country.
True, ma'am. Ma'am, we generally get a lot of questions from academic background. So is it again to gauge the depth of the candidate, how deeply he has understood his own subject and things like that? Or does it have a weightage in the interview, or it's just to gauge the depth of the candidate?
Generally in the personality test, they don't try to gauge the depth of the knowledge of the candidate in a particular subject, because the candidate has already written the examination and come. But sometimes it does happen that some question is thrown starting with his academic background, and then it goes on and on. But I can't say it's a permanent thing or it happens to everybody. So your knowledge about your subject is very, very I think very rare they ask about, because there are several students who would have done engineering and gone for coaching for 2-3 years, and then they with a different subject. Say they would have done engineering and written the exam with public ad or anthropology or sociology, and they won't be able to answer a question on engineering if it's thrown up. And most of the candidates would frankly say that, sir, I've forgotten my subject and I'm not comfortable. Then the board will move on. Board wouldn't like to ask them about subjects which they are not very confident about.
Ma'am, final question from my end. Ma'am, what is the reason behind very low scores? Less than 140, 130?
Reason behind, mostly the reason behind less scores is lack of total knowledge on the part of the candidate to answer any question, because suppose the board throws up say 25 to 30 questions, they don't expect the candidate to know all the answers. Some of the questions go unanswered, like the candidate says, sorry, I'm unable to answer, but if he answers the others very well, he would be able to get a good score. The candidates who get very less scores are, their communication skills are very bad. They speak one-liners and they are not confident about what they are speaking, and they try to bluff. When you go for an interview for the UPSC, you should be very frank. If you know the answer, you should say yes, and if you don't know the answer, you should admit that you don't know the answer. Bluffing will discourage the board in giving him a good score. So one is lack of proper communication, giving the right answer, not having the right perspective, and trying to, you know, mislead the board with the talking something which is not right. And the overall personality, you know, sometimes does make a you know, make one of the parameters for getting a lesser marks. Being nervous and all, it's fine, because generally people are nervous. But being totally, you know, unimpressive in the way they deliver, and the overall personality being very unsure, and communication, I feel, is
The key.
the key, that you're not able to talk and give answers at all to the many questions put forth.
Okay, ma'am.
That is.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.